Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all so much for being here. If anyone's looking for a seat, there's like a bunch right in the front here and over in this section. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Bonnie. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm the poetry event coordinator here at Brookline Booksmith. Today it is my absolute pleasure to host Oliver de la Paz and Lillian-Yvonne Bertram for a lovely evening of poetry. Before I introduce our poets, I have just a few housekeeping notes. Firstly, copies of the poets' books are going to be available for sale at the back counter over there. I encourage you to support their work in whatever way you can, whether that means buying a book, following them online, saying nice things to them tonight, or in general, good point, or ever. Secondly, please just keep your phones off or on silent for the duration of the reading, and thank you for being considerate. This event is being live streamed on the iPad right by this column right here. Our audience shouldn't be visible to our live stream viewers, but if you don't want to be live on YouTube, just avoid walking in front of it, and then you will be fine. And finally, we will have a Q&A at the end of the event, so hold your questions until the end, but definitely have them ready to go. If you enjoy poetry readings, we also host a monthly poetry series called Third Thursday's Poetry, which takes place, you guessed it, on the third Thursday of each month here at the store. All of our poetry events, Third Thursdays, and special events like these are listed on our website, so you can go check those out should you like to. And now for the fun part, introductions. Oliver de la Paz was born in the Philippines and raised in Oregon. He now teaches at the College of the Holy Cross and in the low residency MFA program at PLU. Oliver is the Poet Laureate of Worcester and serves as the co-chair of the Kundiman Advisory Board. He is also the author of 6 books: Names Above Houses, Furious Lullaby, Requiem for the Orchard, which won the Akron Poetry Prize, Post Subject, A Fable, and The Boy in the Labyrinth, a finalist for the Massachusetts Book Award. Of course, his newest work, the Diaspora Sonnets, was released 2 weeks ago from Liberate Press. Congratulations. And we are lucky enough to get to hear some poems from it tonight. With Stacey Lynn Brown, he co-edited A Face to Meet the Faces, an anthology of contemporary persona poetry. Oliver has won multiple pushcart prizes, and his work has appeared in the New York Times, Poetry, American Poetry Review, and elsewhere. And he's received grants from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Massachusetts Cultural Council, just to name a few. Oliver, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And of course, Lillian-Yvonne Bertram is the author of several books, including But a Storm is Blowing from Paradise, winner of the Benjamin Saltman Award, A Slice from the Cake Made of Air, and Personal Science. Their collection, Travesty Generator, was a National Book Award longlist and winner of the 2018 Noemi Press Poetry Prize. And Negative Money, which was released just about a month and a half ago, from Sauce Skull Press, is a finalist for the New England Book Award. And of course, we'll be hearing poems from it tonight. They're an associate professor of English, Africana Studies, and Art and Design at Northeastern University, and previously directed the MFA in Creative Writing at UMass Boston. They're also a recipient of a National Endowment for the Arts Creative Writing Poetry Fellowship, among several other honors and fellowships, and hold degrees in creative writing from the University of Utah, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and Carnegie Mellon University. They're currently a pre-doctoral diversity fellow at Ithaca College, where they teach. Just kidding. They used to be a pre-doctoral diversity fellow at Ithaca College, where they taught creative writing. Thank you, Lillian-Yvonne, for being here tonight. I personally have been looking forward to this event for quite some time, and of course the day is here. I'm so looking forward to the two of you sharing work from your collections. We really are in for a spectacular evening of poetry. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Oliver and Lillian-Yvonne.
Thank you, Bonnie. Can you hear me? Cool. It's really such a treat to be with Lillian-Yvonne, a poet that I've admired for a really long time. And it's so sad that you're leaving. But this is a celebration of their work. I'm going to read 7 poems from the new book. And a couple things to know. In 1972, Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law, and my family was blacklisted by that regime, partially because my uncle on my father's side was one of the students who was participating in the uprising against the regime. And my father was the person who paid for his education, and so he was worried that it would be tracked back to our family. So much of this book is about our travels about the United States, and in a way, it sort of mythologizes my father. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'll read about 7 poems from this. First poem is entitled Chain Migration 1, Airport Coin Op Food. My father changed his cash to coins and stuffed them in machines to buy us food. The airport noise, my sense of father's schemes, a dense commotion. Gleaming walks where heels click-clacked endless to my childish sense of things. Back where home was, a blankness. The streets of Marikina crammed behind my eyes somewhere or lost in pockets stuffed with crumbs of airplane crackers. Where once a memory, only clothes shoved in a small valise. And who's to say what staying close would bring us? Father's peace? A way to keep us self from worry? Or did my father think about his stack of quarters, palmed and warm, the sunk weight of the coins against his thigh, the sound of the exchange from one self to another life, a rattle in the cage, causing the rack of a machine to turn its gears and drop a bag of chips, not quite a dream, but here for now, a stop. So as Bonnie mentioned, I grew up in Eastern Oregon. I lived in Eastern Oregon for a good time, and much of what I did in the summer was work in the farms and in the orchards. And so did my father for a little bit. Diaspora Sonnet with my father in the desert, seeing the valley before him and nothing else. I imagined him to be God, seeming to birth a spring wind which rattled our mobile of spoons. Did he unearth books to guide us to this moment? And having read the books, their taboos and their secrets, did he hide their possible romances? And did he save nothing in his pockets save justice and disaster, unpardoned by the creases in my palm? And having had his hands framed by a racket of bone, did the wreck of their meat tell us how to receive the wild fields? Did these systems, complicit in however we push through, have answers despite my father's outrage? My dad was mad, pretty angry about having to leave. This next poem's about being babysat by television. I was a latchkey kid. My parents would go work and then they would just sort of leave me in front of the television. And this is a poem about not seeing myself on television. Diaspora Sonnet on the glossy cover of TV Guide. Because we were not chosen for the dance, we scouted work parties, fast food, romanced in darkened rooms where loudly pool cues stalked us, angry broods with games of chance. We weren't chosen for the dance with kings and senators. We're blades of grass, while luminaries, fat on roasted pig and ribs on spits, enhanced their looks with hair products that let them shine beautifully above us in orbit. Whole galaxies of the gorgeous on TV. To see them wear such luscious finery and shine like polished stones for want of love, for want of having been. And we tuned out the channels cycled down and felt the crash. So not all the poems are in sonnets, as you probably have surmised. Part of it is like I cheat on my sonnets, and so I wanted to show people that I actually know what I'm doing. So I wrote, a couple of lyric ballads, and I wrote this pantoum. And this pantoum was written. It was commissioned by the ICA for an exhibit that they had when Home Won't Let Us Stay. There's a gigantic map that opened the exhibit. It was a Rina Saina Kalat. It was just kind of this electrified map of the world. And this poem was sort of inspired by that. Pantoum beginning and ending with thorns. Because of the way a border on a map twists into thorns, my father stood in line in a ruined country with ruined men. We were footnotes on charred parchment, the boundaries lost at the precipice of war, shifting on the hour in spliced histories. My father stood in line in a ruined country with ruined men. And what for? Did he imagine the desert he would bring us to? At the precipice of a war shifting on the hour in spliced histories, the call to leave home throbbed inside him, urgent pulses. And what for? Did he imagine the desert he would bring us to? Its thirsty and abandoned towns. There was a fire spreading within. The call to leave home throbbed inside. Urgent pulses crossed and uncrossed like tributaries on freshly inked maps. In thirsty and abandoned towns, there was a fire spreading within, so he took us away, because the country was ruled by swords which crossed and uncrossed like tributaries on freshly inked maps. And the guns would sound all night like feast days of saints. He took us away because the country was ruled by swords and men emblazoned with chevrons and pins. And the guns would sound all night like feast days of saints, but really there was more silence. There was worry and fear. And men emblazoned with chevrons and pins would draw black X's over places they'd conquered. Really. Then more silence, then worry and fear. The flies would sing their hymnals in procession around the dead, the black X's over places now conquered. Maps of provinces, cities, family lines drawn and redrawn. The flies singing their hymnals in procession around the dead, and my father with a ticket to flee because home wouldn't let us stay. Maps of provinces, cities, family lines drawn and redrawn into travelogues and diaries, into stories passed in the night, like my father with a ticket to flee because home wouldn't let us stay. Hum of the plane engine, hum of the idling car, hum of the outboard motor, into travelogues and diaries, into stories passed in the night. We were footnotes on a charred parchment, the borders lost to the hum of planes, to idling cars, to the hum of the outboard motor, because of the way the line on the map twists into thorns. Three more poems. Thank you. So, my father, because of his paranoia and his fear, was obsessed with guns. And he owns several. And this is a poem, trigger warning, care warning, about his gun. Diaspora Sonnet on my father's guns. My father's rifle is a house of sorts. Its nerves are blunted, cold beneath the steel, and rooms echo with reports of noise, loud and boisterous hailstones, not bullets. The thing we flee from, rain and nature. The rifle makes a poor roof. He holsters it to him in fear of his body and the pains of imperatives from another country. The shelters flimsy and flecked with sparks, ash and fireworks on display. July, dark to light, the open sky blooming, bouquets, my father's bewilderment. There are ghost lights seared into what had been seen, a weight as heavy as the gun my father cradles. And so I sort of mythologize my father in this, and this is an imagination of him in his younger years. And what's remarkable to me is that when they left the Philippines, they were in their 20s. When I think about what I was doing in my 20s, I was just playing like NHL hockey. 2004, I was really good at it too. Diaspora Sonnet, imagining my father on the streets of Marikina, Metro Manila. My father in his 20s wears his pressed suit and carries a small hat box possessing something sensible, something pleased with itself. And through the cacophony of the queued up industry of men coming home from work, my father is playing. Avenues of dust and motor trikes belch in umbrage to the poem of it. We might have stayed, my plain father, tired of the staccato of each adjectival commute, loamy, warm, blunted, and angry, plain as the possibility of wonder in a hat box, as sensible as the need to leave the country. He is the center of sense, my father, never hesitating to thread his Windsor knot and polish his one pair of dress shoes, because he will wear his hat. He will go, and thereafter we will live in his thereafters. I'm gonna read two more. Thank you. Diaspora Sonnet, imagining my father putting away his suits because there's no place to go. The fact that love was what had brought us here still registers against my father's loss, a pact he made when he was only years removed from primary. And still the costs are ghostly stops and starts that drift amid his daily oaths. Sometimes he paused to brush the soot from cigarette ash, formalistic and pomaded, the straight-legged pantsuit plush with the promise of love born from abroad. Such elegant clothes, the best he could pack. And how he glistened with promise, well shod, his left and right now burdened steps, manic with worry now, my beautiful father, under the heavy calculus of what's after. And this is the last poem. Thank you all so much. Pantoum beginning and ending with a big sky. Where the horizon meets the plains, a sharp line cuts into my sight. Bursts of scrub and bare pine emerge from the earth like little prayers. Unheard breaths catch in scraps of wind. Here we are, cut into my sight. Bursts of scrub and bare pine hold us in the frame and place us closer to home. Breaths catch in scraps of wind. Here we are, monuments aligned with a certain perspective. Hold us in the frame and place us closer to home if there's a home for us. Remember where we stand, monuments aligned with a certain perspective, perhaps from the side, perhaps just disappearing. If there's a home for us, remember where we stand so we can return to it. Trace our steps backward, perhaps from the side, perhaps just disappearing in the rear view. My father's arm on my headrest so he can return to it. Trace his steps backward, back from his working paces, back from the road in the rear view. My father's arm on my headrest as he puts the car in reverse, as he watches the mirror, back from his working paces and back from the road. I think he dreams of change, dreams of me, as he puts the car in reverse and as he watches the mirror, imagines who I'd become or other possibilities. I think he dreams of me, of change, driving out of this desert, setting fire to the road, imagines who I'd become or other possibilities that are maybe just within reach off the interstate. I'd drive out of this desert and set fire to the road. I'd emerge from the earth like a prayer unheard. I'd take the off-ramp and ease off the interstate. I'd see where the horizon and the plains form a sharp line. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oliver. It's always a pleasure to hear you read. I've been a huge fan of Oliver's work for quite a long time, and this book is amazing. Thank you to all of you who are here. I never plan what I'm gonna read, which like when I get up here, then I'm like, oh shoot, I should have planned what I was gonna read. And the fact that there's like sticky notes in here, like don't be fooled, I didn't plan it. I was like, let me look like I planned. But I didn't, so. I don't know how this will go, but if anyone has any requests, that's fine. If you just wanna like throw out a random number, I can like read the poem on that page, that's fine. But as Oliver mentioned, I am leaving, I'm moving away, and I'm leaving the state of Massachusetts. And I arrived here 7 years ago to teach in the UMass Boston MFA program, and I believe my first students are here, like the first class from like 7 years ago. They were and are amazing. So I think I'll read a poem about something that transpired during my own MFA program when I was so young. And this book is called Negative Money, and it's about money, but more than anything, it's about like negotiating value or understanding how you move through the world and how value is placed on you or removed and things like that. It also deals with a lot of like indebtedness and transaction and owing and being owed and extraction. So that's kind of some of the underlying themes. The river, it shines pure white. The professor jokes that he'll leave me somewhere, around Danville, somewhere along the banks of the Wabash. He raises his eyebrows in a joke. Wabash from Wabash, from the original Wapasiki, you know, around sundown. Wapasiki meaning pure white, or it shines white, or water over white stones. Around those sundown towns, see how you like it. It's just Illinois. We take long drives together to get something or other. A bag of feed, a set of stakes for a fence, a rope for a dog tie, a set of golf clubs, huevos rancheros and biscuits. He jokes, laughs. It's not personal. I dry into the seat like a seed, laugh. Yes, I can take a joke. We are friends. I yoked a long laugh, laugh along. It's Illinois, 2007. Tuesdays are tornado siren tests. It's not personal. The news about this surprising senator, black member of a legislating body. It's not personal. He's so, for one of them, articulate. I am a student. I'm helping out. It's my job. picking up the visiting writer. It's Illinois 2000-something, the B&B's big business is in visiting professors. Harvest season air all but combusts. I'm waiting in the lobby where the white proprietress says, I impress her, I'm so articulate. It's Illinois 2000 and she prefers lighter people. It's not personal. I'm wearing some, but not too many, gold hoops. The visiting writer appears in her long black dreads at the top of the stairs. It's not personal. But I didn't again go to give that place business. It was Illinois. It was never personal. Not about me or the professor refusing a recommendation, though we passed for friends. Drove long stretches in the country, white stars passed overhead, choked the night ash of pasture burn. I can take an it's not personal joke. It's not personal. I mean nothing mean in remembering to those who would have the clubhouse. But I have not forgotten, even now, I am apologizing for this colored memory. Testing sirens. It's Illinois. I told the professor how I was mesmerized by the corn. It's why I came Midwest. I wanted to know what in all it's been whispering about prosperity. Whispering all this time about freedom, coming in waves like heat off tar. I searched the Illinois skies for funnels, stand 3 days a week in front of 22 white students, stand like a strip of it's not personal, like a strip of black electrical tape, pressing wire to a white wall. I listen for the storms. Tornadoes, they say, sound like imagine you are facing a train. Thank you. Not having planned this. I used to have a barber in Boston, and I loved him. Hey, Elliot. That's not the barber, but that's my friend. I haven't seen him in a long, long time. I had a barber in Boston, and I love him, and he gives great lineups and everything. So this is not to like drag him, because he is, whatever. Story from a white barbershop. Listen, I don't know how to rescue myself. Now that we've gone through job talk and landed on football, and in his wisest voice, he's giving me his hot takes on scrimmaging with and against you all in high school and college football. He thinks there is something more between us when he says, between you and me, your people's natural agility, thigh size, and training response are centuries of someone else's brewing. His grace on the #1 blade is why I stay beneath the 1,000 birds humming away the trouble creeping down the back of my neck, and he cuts a hard part crisper than blackened toast. But it's tricky work saving white people from themselves when it's too late, or maybe it's too ironic not to, when who can I claim as friend if not the man slicking my curls into a glossy pompadour, each strand a bright black tune. But tonight he knows a thing or two about slavery. He's deduced how it's worked to our advantage. That owners mated the strongest with the fastest, and today we can outrun and catch the world one-handed. Once, a white man called me to my face, and I wailed on him until my jeweled rings defleshed my knuckles, until that man's friends said they'd abandon their refinements and hit a girl if it came to that. Sure as a bear shits in the woods, it comes to something all right. An intimate time of night, when a white man dusts my neck with that fine, polar talc of his tradition. And I couldn't tell you which Drake verse was limning the mood. I know the logic of camouflage and want the good thing to stay the good thing, even when it can't. I tip well anyway. Let him think generosity is in my bones. When I moved here, I moved to Lowell, and my realtor wanted to show me a condo in this building, which I did end up living in, and I was like, no way, man, I'm not seeing this condo. And he's like, why not? He's like, it's like perfect, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, in the photos, the real estate photos, I was like, the man has a Confederate flag on his wall. And like, you could tell that like, and I was like, no, and my realtor was like, oh, you know, and so we ended up seeing it, and like the guy who owned it was like a Civil War reenactor, and so there's all this like the losing side, right? And so there's all this like, and you know, like a reenactor and like collector of paraphernalia of like the losing side of major wars, and so I was like, no way I'm seeing this, no way. I ended up buying it. So, colonizer money. Haven't yet bought the plantation where we were slaves, but bought a condo from a Confederate soldier reenactor, saged the shit out of it, and moved in. Dignity strikes when opposing forces collide. Loud ballots took a swipe at my gut, so nothing smelled decent those harrowing years of purgation. On the street, we kill each other, take the inverse, and kill each other again. Haven't yet bought drone warfare or votes, but bought candor, misunderstood maxims, and an hour in the deprivation tank where the last man to float here smudged the starry night and fouled up the salt water with his scabs. So there's a lot of poems in this book that have money in the title. It's all this sort of series of money poems. Money can buy a 13th month. Billionaire boy sells seats on his rocket, and my tub won't warm water enough for my own 10 stone. I piss my pool. Siri, how cold is orbit? Siri, play me Saturn's rings. Icy space spurns all tenders. Money, you spurn me. Why didn't I invent the door factory? Money, make me a shield, for the end of this world repeats the end of this world. Money's voice burbles up from the smart home. Did you say neutral innocence? Did you say bath bomb? What can I help you obtain? Monopoly money, and this one was from my oldest friend. The year I was fucking tea and called it dating, Kate was, for real dating, the tattooed, skinny vegan anarchist who would break her heart for an even skinnier tattooed wannabe crust punk. And Kate was also fucking a Doctor Who lookalike, the David Tennant one. And Kay was staggering back from Kevin, who returned from his work trip engaged to a coworker, so Kay had to move out right now. And S got punched in the face by her boyfriend. And T's girlfriend hated me, so I hated her right back. And T was an alcoholic fireman the year I had a thing for drunks in uniform. And in the coldest December on record, the polar vortex peaked the night Kate's mom died. And we waited in the ICU with bourbon under our parkas till Kate came out with her mother's things in a canvas tote bag. And Kate's dad offered to buy us some pizzas, but we went to the bar instead and did shots till midnight. And then it was Kate's birthday, and we loved hard as we've been taught to love, but dead mothers stay dead. And before he stopped leaving his house for good, Kate's dad stood with us in the hospital parking lot and pointed to the swirling red gases above and said, "See that? That's Jupiter. That's my wife's favorite planet." Raw girl money. All us girls, we agreed to be big teen islands, scouring the slips for who came closest. I tented my sour girl with boy-textured leans from the could have been. Couldn't let out what lived in the back, with all the trouble rubbing at my tender. A girl's sight becomes real in the flea, her thrum of identifying marks, private seams, marbles of fat for pillage. I meet myself at every mask collapse. Like the old wounds slack on my hiddens, I was the danger I exchanged for my hair, the song I rubbed against my song. Let's see. Keith, any requests? You know this book. This is VDOT planning.
Cornfields?
What?
Cornfields?
Oh, the far fields are made of glass?
Yes.
Okay. Where is it? I think this is also, I did my MFA in Illinois, and so I spent a lot of time hanging out in cornfields. Where is that poem? There we go. I believe the far fields are made of glass and research, corn-clad and thick on moans. There at the edge of the wheel, the tar bubbles burst, and they kept on bursting as long as the mile stayed a mile, which it did. What they did not want to speak of, the men burned out there, pasture, polio rags, poplin junk, as long as there was a day to foul, which was a long while. Tar, a wincing mammal. Someone asked if I missed my friends, the more erotic pints we shared. But I squeezed and pulled one damp loaf down from the shelf after another. Donning a white man's mania all his own, Teddy Roosevelt believed in boar hunts and war-suckled men. He'd have something to say about these enterprising sunsets, the shivering alfalfa, trim and sweet like champagne. I'll read two more. My past has value to the men who never knew me then. If pretty now, think how pretty when, so newly wounded in a world. They paid for rent, spent hundreds on this girl's birthday steaks. Men away from wives on work trips are simple men with simpler desires. Of what did I remind them? To the first man who checked me out in the corner bookshop at 13 and left $10 at the counter for that girl. Thank you for funding Vonnegut, Bukowski, and Freud. Men on the shelf of men who told me what to think, who toyed with drunk too much, drive too reckless, who interpreted for me all my dreams. To the man who said I was too much hyperbola, you were right. To the night car salesman who let me test drive all the way to Whole Foods, paid for my cashews, thank you, you fool. For the boyfriend who made me walk on the inside. Too easy for a girl to get meloned, flesh scooped up and out. As for my first husband, all his likenesses stowed in family albums, I snuck out and composted with the wedding dress. As for you, Father, you always had a thing for fairness and better floating boats. Thank you for knowing the marina was the strangest place to take me as a child, where I skipped rocks, learned to steady myself on the fickle floating docks, and learned to admire the sleepy, teak-decked tombs of other people's money. And I'll close with the title poem of the book, assuming I can find it. Negative money. So delirious from drought, my town went singing to seeds. Those who stayed could barely make a Sunday choir. Not enough juice in the county to plump up the memory of water or a single itinerant tomato. I made the same poisoned meal. days like 2 midnights in a jar, and it takes twice as much money to live the way a cactus lives on air. My men took to cards and drink as punishment for stricken soil. The dust blew so bad, and like anyone, I made a list of names I wouldn't mind dressing in a child of my own. We paid a charlatan to shoot rain out of clouds, but the dynamite tied to kites proved more useless than mud. Like any good charlatan, he never returned. But enough pale misery. Now we are poor in every corner of the word. Not a pot to piss in, or skin of a fig to suck on. Thank you.
Let's give one more round of applause. And so commences, I can turn. All right, so now commences our Q&A. If folks have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. But I do have a question to kick us off, which is, you both have written many books. You both have been in academia for a really long time. I'm really curious. Well, a really long time. I'm sorry. I'm a baby. I'm in my 20s. I'm curious how your sort of process has changed over the course of your careers when you're approaching writing a book.
My process has always been haphazard, like thoroughly haphazard, and it remains so to this day. Academia contributes to that because it's just like emails and this and fires and that, and so it's just like that the books happen is, I don't want to say by chance, but it almost sometimes feels that way.
Yeah, I mean, when I was single and without children, I wrote every day. It was, and I wrote crap every day, but I wrote every day. And then when I had kids, summers, that's it. So it's changed that way. And mostly I write in sequences or series. So it sort of makes sense that I'm writing in small, short bursts. And it so happens to fit under the academic calendar. So basically summers I write. Yeah.
Thank you. And do we have any questions from folks in the audience?
Or just comments and thoughts, like that's cool too. It doesn't have to be a question.
Yeah, go ahead in the back
I
row.
was wondering whether you wrote poetry as children, or when did you start?
So when my family immigrated to the United States, one of the first things that my parents did when they found a home to settle in was they subscribed to Reader's Digest. And one of the benefits that you could get from Reader's Digest in the subscription is a selection from their book club. And so they chose the collected poems of Robert Penn Warren as their book, which is weird. And that was my first poetry book. Robert Penn Warren. And so, it was weird because my mom had a library filled with medical books and things that were very pragmatic, and this was a book that did not fit. And so I was really enthralled by what it looked like and how it did those things on the page. And this is back in the days of the manual typewriter. So I was playing with poetry and the kinesthetic nature of doing the carriage return and the typing and the carriage return. So probably like when I was 6 years old, I started writing. They weren't good poems, but it was just really the fact of the typewriter and being able to play. Yeah.
I feel like my story is not dissimilar. In that, like, manual typewriters, yes, like that was the thing in our household. I was lucky to have very literate parents who was, was just like, you're bored, read a book, kind of thing. So, and so like, yeah, I was probably writing poems, bad poems, but what's bad to a 6-year-old, right? Or an 8-year-old or 10, I was like writing poems about marshmallows, you know what I mean? And but they elicited such joy, that it was like, why stop, So yeah, it's definitely like something that I've always done, or like writing in some kind of way I've always done. And you read like Dr. Seuss or Shel Silverstein eventually, and you imitate that. So yeah, that's a good question.
Go ahead.
Can you tell me a bit about your relationships with form, like sonnet, pantoum, free form, what works for you and how come?
Can you repeat the question?
So the question was about my relationship, or our relationship to form, in particular sonnets, pantoums, free form, what have you. I consider myself strangely a formalist. Whenever I write a book, I think about shape or structure. And so in the case of the Diaspora Sonnets, I was intentional about picking sonnets because how Western the sonnet is and how not Western my family is. And so I wanted the conversation of the perfection of the sonnet to be part of the book. And so intermittently I included things like the ballad, which was a nod to the epic tradition for me. And then I wanted to sort of close each section with pantoums, which are, originally a Malaysian form or an Asian form, which was dialogic, or it was spoken over in terms of a dialogue or a communal chant. And so I closed those sections with those. And so I was very intentional about form. And anytime I construct a book, I'm very intentional about form. I'm thinking about shape, and I'm thinking about what are the shapes that your obsessions are contained in.
I feel like that's a good description of form, like the shape of your obsession in some ways. I don't write in form, but I also don't not, in a sense, like there is a sonnet in this book. You do have to kind of find it. It doesn't announce itself as such. I think maybe similar to you, I write in series, but very short series, 5 at a time, 5 poems at a time. And the poems in that grouping will all share some sort of formal aspect. Maybe it's how they look on the page, maybe it's a title, maybe it's a theme or a process. And so everything has a kind of constraint. It's just not always one that has a name that we know as a received constraint. There's graphic poems in this book that it had done with graphic design, and there's a bar graph, I think, and there's so there's a lot of stuff sort of in these series. And I would say I work maybe more with certain constraints maybe than specific received forms.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? All right. Oh, go right ahead.
Hi, Katie.
So for each of you, and thinking about the themes of your books, curious to know about what that process is like. If it's you start with the theme, how that comes to be, and then you write kind of under that, or if you kind of are looking at patterns within what you're writing and then drawing them together.
Yeah, I feel the latter for me, where it's there's patterns that come together, or I'll write I think maybe I wrote a poem and it was something money, and I was there's gonna be money poems, kind of a thing. Or I had some poems. There's a grouping of poems in the book called World Maps, and they were all visual poems. It's that's kind of a section. I feel everything I write is under a certain kind of theme. I'm trying to think what don't I write about? I mean,
Yeah, we're kind of similar
Yeah.
in terms of how we write.
yeah, and so I'm never not writing about certain things. And then, but for me, for the process of putting a book together, it's very much seeing what I've written and then kind of being like, okay, this can go here and this can go here, as opposed to like, here's my idea and I'm gonna write under it. I don't really do that. I'm not very good at that.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to quilting, right? Like you have, you know, panel after panel after panel, and you're creating a set of patterns, and then trying to figure out how these patterns fit together in constructing a larger pattern. That's kind of how I work. That I will compose and compose and compose, and oftentimes the pieces have the same title or similar titles. I have no idea how to organize them, but I look for thematic patterns that are emerging. So it's very mathy. You know, it's very mathematical. It's very, you know, there's a lot of problem solving and critical thinking when it comes to assembly. So you look for valences that charge one another as they sit adjacent to each other.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I mean, I think like, especially when putting the book together, like if the speaker in one poem is like looking to the left, then like maybe in another poem the speaker's looking to the right, and you might put those things together under like the theme of like observation, right? Like these poems are like the speaker's observing in some kind of way, or they're being observed in some kind of way. So like that sort of like mathy, abstract level. Yeah.
Good question. Thanks.
All right, we do have time for more if anyone has one. Going once, going twice. All right, well, thank you so much to our audience for your lovely questions. And thank you, Lillian-Yvonne, and all of you so much for sharing your work here tonight.